Today, I'm going to answer the questions, what is bourbon and how should you drink it? And at the very end of this video, I'm going to share with you the absolute best way to drink your bourbon. Welcome to Bourbon 101. So, if all bourbons are whiskeys, but not all whiskeys are bourbons, what's the difference? Let's have a look. First of all, bourbon can only be made in the US. Just as Scotch can only be made in Scotland, bourbon can only be made in the United States, America. Second, bourbon must contain a mash bill or recipe of at least 51% corn. Nope, not that corn. There we go. The other 49% is typically made up of rye and malted barley. Sometimes a distiller will substitute rye for wheat, while other distillers may even use oats or even brown rice. Third, bourbon must be aged in new oak barrels. A bourbon can be finished in a used barrel, but the initial aging process must be done in brand new barrels. 4. Bourbon must be distilled at no higher than 160 proof and cannot be barreled at any higher than 125 proof. When bourbon is bottled, it must be bottled between 80 and 150 proof. Now, there are no minimum aging requirements for bourbon. However, to be considered a straight bourbon, it must be aged for a minimum of 2 years and can contain no added coloring or flavoring. Now, before we get into the fun stuff, let's go over a few common terms you may see on different labels of bourbon. Let's start with single barrel. A single barrel bourbon is just that. It was bottled from a single barrel of bourbon. Single barrel bourbons are typically a little more hand-selected, so they can tend to offer a little bit better flavor profile. However, they can vary greatly from one bottling to the next. Another thing that you'll see quite often is barrel proof or barrel strength or cask strength. They're all the same thing. A barrel proof bourbon is just that. It was bottled at the same proof that it came out of the barrel. The absence of water can tend to lead to a little richer flavor profile. Now you may also see the term full proof. Full proof means that it was bottled at the same proof that it was barreled at. A lot of times during the aging process, the proof will increase. So to be called a full proof, if it went into the barrel at 125 proof and came out at 130 proof, they will add water and dilute it back down to 125. Now let's talk about a little bit of a tricky one, small batch. A small batch bourbon is a blend of a smaller amount of barrels than a distiller's main line would be barreled from. Now, it's all a relative term. If you're talking about a craft distillery, a small batch may be 5, 10, maybe even 15 barrels to make a small batch. But if you're talking about a larger distillery, there could still be upwards of 300 barrels in a small batch. Now, let's get into the last one I want to cover. It's the good old bottled in bond. The Bottled in Bond Act of 1897 was a way for the government to combat the production of lower quality whiskeys. To be considered a bottled in bond bourbon, it must meet a few criteria. Bottled in bond must be the product of a single distiller at a single distillery in one distilling season. It must be aged for a minimum of 4 years in a federally bonded warehouse, and it must be bottled at 100 proof. So if you ever come across anything that's bottled in bond or bonded, you've got a pretty good shot that that's a solid bourbon. Now, without further ado, let's get into the good part. How should you drink your bourbon? I'm sorry about that, y'all. Just doing a little goofing, a little new boot goofing. Let's talk about drinking whiskey. There's countless ways to drink, obviously. So I'm just going to kind of cover what are some of the more traditional ways of drinking bourbon. I think first of all, it's important to have the proper glassware. if you're gonna get that full experience. These are called glencairns. This is kind of the traditional bourbon drinking glass. It's got a bulb shape that tapers up that will help kind of concentrate the aromas. That's mainly what this style of glass is for the smelling part of drinking. Not absolutely necessary by any means, but it can definitely provide kind of a fuller drinking experience. If you don't have glencairns, it's fine. If you've got a brandy snifter or a wine glass, just kind of anything with this kind of shape to it that has a little taper, it's definitely going to benefit you in the long run, I believe. Not necessary, like I said, but I think it's definitely going to help. This is a traditional Glen here. Very simple, bulbous shape at the bottom, the nice little taper up to the top. I kind of prefer these La Mirada Glens. They've got a little flare. Everything in the bottom is the same, but it's got a little flare at the top. I kind of like the way it fits my mouth a little bit better. They're a little weightier too, so they don't feel as tipsy, if you will. I'll leave a link in the description below where you can find some different style Glens. But yeah, start with the right glassware. I think it's just going to benefit you in the long run. Let's talk about drinking bourbon neat. Drinking neat is just straight up your glass and your bourbon. Nothing fancy about it. This is my preferred way to drink, but I'll be honest with you, if you're gonna drink bourbon neat, you might be a little bit crazy. If you like drinking it neat, at least you're in good company, so you're not alone. So let's talk about this. When you're drinking bourbon neat, you kind of want to prepare yourself, if you will. There are a few things that can affect your drinking experience. You don't really want to be you don't want to be eating a bunch of spicy food right before you do this. It's going to throw your palate way out of whack. Your palate may enjoy the food, but when you get into the bourbon, you're not really going to be able to kind of get the most out of it, if you will. So kind of watch what you're eating. You don't want to brush your teeth right before you do this. Again, it's just going to totally trash your palate. I'd rather drink orange juice right after I brush my teeth than bourbon. So kind of time that, if you're going to be sitting down trying to get this full experience out of it. Sleep is important. You don't want to do this when you're sleep deprived. Your body's just not going to be able to process it the same way as it will if you've gotten some good rest. So make sure you rest up. I think your mood can also play a big role in your experience. If you're under a lot of stress, or you're angry, or you're really sad, just kind of going through some stuff, you may want to kind of deal with that first. I highly recommend it. I had somebody ask me one time, how am I supposed to enjoy bourbon if every time I drink it, I kind of start feeling like I'm the Hulk, kind of getting that feeling. I think a lot of that, and I can't speak for everybody, but I think a lot of that has to do with kind of your internal feelings, some things that you might be dealing with, even if you're not realizing it at the moment. Like, you can be in a good mood at the moment, but there can still be some underlying things that you may not have dealt with. I'll be completely transparent. I used to use whiskey as a vice. It did not work out very well for me in the long run, so I definitely don't promote that. If you can find an inner peace, kind of deal with the things that are going on in your life, I think once you get to the drinking part of things, you're just going to have a much better overall experience. Your experience can also change from day to day. Excuse me, I have to keep basic notes here. I'm getting a little older and get a little scatterbrained. But your day-to-day experience can be different. So if you're sitting down one day and you're having a great time, having a great experience, the next time you sit down, you're not, don't just cancel it out. Keep going. This, especially drinking neat, this takes some time for your body to acclimate. Drinking bourbon neat's gonna put some hair on your chest, if you know what I'm saying. So give yourself some time, be patient with it. Don't try to sit down all at once and try to acclimate in one day. Please don't do that. It's not going to be good for you. But so your experience can change definitely from day to day. And definitely take this in moderation. This stuff's no joke. I want everybody to be able to enjoy this. I want everybody to be safe. I want everybody to drink responsibly. So let's kind of work on that together. Love you all. So when you're drinking neat, what I like to do, as you see me do in here, is rolling this glass. This is going to help it air out a little bit. It's going to help some of the ethanol burn up or burn off, and kind of just help things open up before you start sipping. I like to look at the color. Colors in bourbon are just absolutely beautiful. I like to hold it up to a light, look at the colors. I like to look at the legs. The legs are kind of the drippings that are coming down the side of the glass. It's just fun. It's not necessary, but it's kind of fun. It'll kind of give you a little indication on kind of the viscosity that you're about to experience when it hits your mouth. If you notice these legs dropping really fast, it may be a little watery on the mouth. If you notice that they're really gripping onto the glass and just slowly dripping down, it's probably going to be a little bit more oily, which is kind of what I like. So I'll kind of like roll it around, just kind of mess around with it for a little bit. When I go to nose it, it may not be a great idea to just throw it flat up on your nose and take a big whiff. It could blow your face off if you're not careful. So I like to bring it up. I like to open my mouth. It kind of helps access all of the olfactory sensors, because you do have some in your mouth that do play a critical role. So if you open your mouth just a little bit, bring the glass up and just kind of roll it around under your nose. Don't inhale too hard. Just take a nice gentle breath in. Kind of see if you can pick up on any of the aromas. Excuse me. Definitely getting some caramel on this. I'm drinking Wild Turkey Rare Breed, by the way. Definitely picking up some caramels. Little vanilla, definitely some rye spice. Maybe a little bit of a peppery or cinnamony note. But just kind of play around with it. You can't be wrong in what you're smelling. This is your experience. It's going to be different from everybody else's. So don't think that because I'm picking up caramel or cinnamon or pepper and you're not, that you're doing it wrong, because you're not. You're absolutely not doing it wrong. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, and the same goes for tasting. Everybody's taste buds are a little bit different. Some people love tomatoes. I just absolutely don't understand that, because they're disgusting. So don't eat tomatoes. They're gross. But after I've got this to open up a little bit, and I've done, the smelling that I want to do, I'll take my first sip. Now, my first sip is typically really short, and I don't do a lot with it. I get it in, I get it down. It's going to kind of wake up the mouth and prepare it for the next couple sips. So let's do that now. Short, sweet, and to the point. Not really looking for anything on that first sip. Just want to let my palate get ready for what's going to come next. My next sip, I'll typically hold in my mouth, maybe move it around a little bit, and kind of start exploring the flavors that I'm picking up. And again, this is something you can't do wrong. So if I'm describing a caramel or vanilla or oaky note, and you're picking up pepperoni pizza or spaghetti, hey, that's what you're tasting, and it's more about accessing a memory to something that you've tasted before than it is trying to pinpoint it right out of the gate. So try not to think about it too much. Let your memory take over, and you're going to start to pick out some of these notes. Let's see what we get here. First thing I notice is, ooh, it's a little spicy. It's very oily. Woo, it's a little spicy. It's a little oily on the mouth. I'm getting a little bit of caramel, a little bit of vanilla, but I'm getting a lot of rye spice, maybe a little nuttiness there, maybe a little black pepper, maybe a little charred oak. But that second sip is more of my exploratory sip. It's a lot bigger shock to my system because it's a bigger sip. So I really like to let this sit for another moment. And then on my third sip is where I really start dissecting the flavors that I'm picking out. A lot of rye spice. Still a little bit of caramel. Not so much vanilla there. I'm starting to get some more of the burnt wood tastes. Wild Turkey Rare Breed's not a very sweet bourbon, but it's very, very delicious. It's very oily. On that finish, I'm getting a little oak, maybe a little black pepper, maybe a light cinnamon, but very, very spicy. This is gonna bring me to kind of the next part of drinking, is if something's coming across really spicy, or the proof is a little too high, or you're just not enjoying it overall, add a few drops of water and see what that does for it. I've got my trusty eardropper that I use all the time. It's my favorite dropper to use for bourbon. I definitely don't clean it first. But if you're gonna add water, start with 2-3 drops. Swirl it around a little bit. And kind of see how this changes what you're getting even on the nose and definitely in the palate, and see what we have here. Definitely a little sweeter on the nose, a lot more caramel. A little bit softer. Some of the ethanol has burnt off now as well. But it definitely seemed to have opened up some of the sweeter notes. Let's see what we got on the palate. That's really nice, actually. Holds up well. That's a lot better. It's not as punchy in the throat. It's a little smoother, a little more muted. Definitely brings a little bit more sweetness to the palate. I definitely get still getting some strong burnt oak. Definitely still getting the rye spice, but it's not as punchy. So water seems to hold up really well for this. It's fun to experiment with different bottles. Some things it's gonna mute up and kind of take away from the flavor profile. Some things it's gonna open up. This kind of opened up a little sweeter, knocked a little bit of the spice down, but it seems to be really nice with a couple drops of water, for sure. Another way you can do this is over ice. Now, if you're gonna drink bourbon on the rocks, I'm just going full send here with my hands. I recommend you make some clear ice. Clear ice has fewer impurities in the water the way that it freezes, and it can affect the flavor a lot less. I also recommend using large block ice. If you're gonna make your own, cut it into larger blocks. The larger blocks will melt a little bit slower, and you'll be able to enjoy sipping off of that a little bit longer before it gets too watered down. So let's see what this is like over some ice. We'll let this cool here for just a minute. While I'm doing this, I want to thank everybody for all of your support in this last video that I put up. I can't thank y'all enough. It's just overwhelming outpour of support in views and likes and comments. And it means the world to me. And I really want to thank you all for that. It's kind of nerve-wracking and awkward sitting here by myself talking to a camera, but the support that was shown in the last video I dropped has really helped me to connect with y'all as individuals. And man, I really love it. Love y'all all so much. So thank y'all. I really appreciate it. Let's swirl this around here a little bit. Not getting much on the nose out of this glass, especially on the ice. Everything's kind of muted down. If you're dealing with something that's, again, just like the water, if you're dealing with something that's really high proof and it's just hitting really hard, try it on some ice. It may be a little bit more enjoyable that way. If you're gonna be drinking outside and it's really warm, this is a really, really nice way to go. Can help you enjoy your experience a lot more for sure. Let's see what we get here. Oh my, that is nice. It's really mellowed out. The rye spice, the oak is still really strong and present. Not picking up on much of the caramel anymore, but very enjoyable. I don't drink over ice very often, but this is a really nice way to go. Absolutely. As promised, I want to share with you what is irrefutably the best way to drink bourbon. And that is the way you like to drink it. If you like your bourbon on ice cream, don't let anybody tell you you're doing it wrong. There's gonna be a lot of whiskey snobs out there that are gonna tell you, oh, if you're not drinking it this way or that way, you don't know what you're doing and you're just doing it wrong, you're wasting it. Look, this is your whiskey. You're the consumer. You drink it the way you like to drink it, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Give me just a second here. My roots in whiskey are drinking it with Coke. So let's throw a little Coke on this ice. Never had Wild Turkey Rare Breed and Coke, so let's see how this goes. Oh my gosh. That is absolutely delicious. Got to keep strong to my roots. This is where it all began for me back when I was in the Corps, drinking Jack and Cokes, 7 and 7s, Crown and ginger ale. Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. So don't let anybody tell you you're drinking your bourbon wrong, because they're wrong. I think that's about going to wrap things up for this video. Next week, I'm going to start a training your palate series with the bourbons that I featured in the Best Bourbons for Beginners video. If you didn't catch that, I'll leave a link. Actually, I'll probably put it up here at the very end. But I'm going to revisit all of those bottles one at a time and kind of do some power of suggestion training and some tips and tricks on how to recognize the notes that you're picking up on the nose and on the palate a little bit easier. So I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully you'll be here to join me. I would absolutely love to have you. Thank you all for being here today. I absolutely appreciate it. I love you all. Please drink responsibly and go grab yourself a hard corn pour. Cheers. Golly, that's good.